Hey Tool Talk fans, it is another edition of a Jeep related video. I want to get right to the point. I think that this is going to be a video about the steering. I've done the track bar brace with the steering sector shaft brace from Synergy. I've done the Fox stabilizer. I've done many things to try to get that steering just dialed in. Put some 3/4 inch spacers on the Jeep just this weekend and realigned everything. I've got it just cherry. I really am happy where everything is sitting now. But the last piece that I couldn't figure out with our Jeep steering and why people think it's so sloppy and why it varies from Jeep to Jeep is that the steering box has an adjustment built in, and it's much like a gear has backlash. When your gears are so tight and they mesh tight, they'll wear out prematurely and or get damaged in your differential. So if you have backlash, you need to have it set to a certain thousandths of an inch, and it gives it just a little bit of play to create that gear movement so they're not so jammed in there. This is just as bad as it being too sloppy. Well, in your steering box, it's much the same. If those gears that are meshing that you can't adjust in your steering box aren't right where you want them, they may be a little sloppy, they may be a little too tight. You have the ability to fix it. So let's get to that. I hope that this is what I think a lot of people are talking about when they're steering. It just feels kind of like it wants to wander. I've done the real quick rundown. I've done 32 PSI, reset my TPMS to 32 PSI for my taser. I've done a track bar, I've done the steering relocation bracket, I've done the Fox shock, Fox steering stabilizer, and I've done control arms to get everything dialed in. I'm not talking about any of those things. I'm talking that your steering wheel has a little bit of slop in it. So I'm going to show you what the problem is and how to fix it. So let's get to it. All right, so I've only loosened this nut just slightly. There's the green mark from the original stock location. Then the nut on the outside has a green mark that's about 30 degrees off, or it went from the 10 o'clock position to the 7 o'clock position, or just like 7.5. The inside requires a hex, and I'm using a 5/32 hex, and what I have to do is take a 15mm wrench so you take a 15mm wrench to hold that nut, because this is going to move around, and you take the 5/32 to separate the two. I'm going to go to the right to stiffen it, and then I'm going to have it off just a degree. I'll show you here. Okay, so the green line now is back this direction. So the green line's up here. Where we started was here. So these three were lined up at once. So I've backed the nut off. That just all I'm doing is loosening that, and I can move it with my finger. And then to tighten it, now that I have this over here, this is going to move as one piece. I'm going to go back to the bigger wrench and crush this down and snug that back down to where it was. A little bit more, just so I know the torque's right. Okay, so you're going to need a much larger, I'm using a 1/2 inch drive with a long extension and a 15mm socket, and then this is 15mm. I used a closed end wrench, a box wrench, and then stuck that on there, move this over. So now that everything's tight, this is more at the 12 o'clock position, and this is now at the 10 o'clock. So I've tightened it a couple of clock positions here. I'm hoping this firms my steering up, so we're gonna go check it out. All right, so this is now afterwards. Okay, that's much better. There's only like a degree or two in there, whereas there used to be, you know, if I had to move it, it would be like that much. That is right where I want it. I can just noticeably feel some play in there. Because you don't want it too tight, as others have said that are, you know, professionals. They have stated that this can also cause you to have jerky steering, and this is certainly right where I wanted it. It's just this degree or two right there. So that is perfect. All right, well, that about wraps that up. Really quick, easy video. This was one of the favorite, most effective things I've done so far. The steering now feels incredible. It was just a little bit of work to get the bolt dialed in to right where I want it. And I wanted to include in there a picture of how I have it set. This might vary from Jeep to Jeep, but I'm gonna make this video go out with a picture of where I have everything set up so you can take a look at it. And you're going to use a 15mm socket, a 15mm box-end wrench, and a 5/32 Allen. It feels a little loose at 5/32. You probably could get a little bit more Allen wrench in there, but I didn't seem to have one that fit. 4.5mm didn't fit, 5mm didn't fit. So 5/32 is where I think that's at. I hope that you found this video helpful, and that it answered maybe some of your questions as to why our Jeep is kind of sloppy. I can't tell you how ecstatic I am. I could have done this. I should have done this the day I brought it home. It has been this bad since the 1,000 miles I've had it, so 2-3 months. With COVID, it hasn't driven much, but I hope this is something that's very helpful to you. And click like and subscribe, and I'll try to continue to find weird things to fix that all this time we could have done ourselves. It just never fails to amaze me, the stuff that we can actually do on our own in these Jeeps. So I'm learning, you're learning. Let's do this together.